Okay, welcome back to episode 16 of Ag Inspired Conversations. My name is Tommy Heffernan. The concept is fairly simple. It's to have interesting conversations with people doing inspiring things in agriculture. And my next guest is absolutely no different. I've had lots of conversations with Karina over the last couple of years, and I found her absolutely inspiring. Former Professor of Dairy Production in UCD, now Senior Development Advisor in Dairy Food Division with Enterprise Ireland. First and foremost, good morning, Karina.
Hi, Tommy. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm good, and thank you so much for your time, Karina, this morning. So I suppose, like everybody that I've had a conversation with, I try and go into the past a little bit before we go to the present. Okay, so you're well known in Irish agriculture. You've had a huge number of roles, but I suppose particularly your role as Professor of Dairy Production Systems, you've been involved in so many boards, and I've heard you speak at so many conferences. So people will know you. But I suppose, who is Karina Pierce? You're not too far from me here in County Wicklow, and how did you get involved in agriculture?
Who am I, Tommy? There's a question. No, I'm from a farm in Wicklow, so in Roundwood, up in the highest village, and grew up here on a small farm, suckler and sheep, and just was involved in the farm from the time I could walk. And I was very lucky that my dad was full-time at home farming, and I just was like an extension to his leg, I think, from the time I was small. So yeah, loved it. And that, I suppose, stayed with me all my life, really. Built back on the home farm about 10 years ago, so ruined a good field. But my brother manages the farm now on a part-time basis. But lately we bought 5 Suffolk Cross Ewes, Tommy, so we're going big into sheep, headlong into sheep now since I left UCD.
I've been in your house as a guest, and you have one of the best views in Ireland, looking out over from a high point, looking out over Roundwood. It's a beautiful part of the world. Yeah,
no, it's lovely, and it's funny actually. While COVID, and I'm sure we'll hit COVID at some stage, but while COVID has been a challenge, it's actually made me really appreciate, I think, where I live in a way that, you know, I always knew like it was a nice place. I mean, I've grown up here and everything, but maybe when you're younger, you're more interested in getting down to the village or to the nearest town than you are looking at the views out over the lakes and that. But yeah, it's been great actually, and a great escape to be able to get up into the forest. And I see you running the tracks around one part of Wicklow, maybe while I was running around another part, but it has been amazing actually over the lockdown to be able to do that.
We're so lucky to have that. Like, it's huge headspace for me. It's my bit of headspace to get out to the hills. And you do a bit quite. You've run a marathon, haven't you? You've done.
No, I had to pull out in a few weeks beforehand with an injury about 2 years ago. But maybe we'll see on the bucket list. But I found, just because I'm not commuting since March, I just had time in the mornings that I never had before. So I'd hit off out, and like I say, we're on the Wicklow Way, so be able to just get up straight into the forest. Nobody could see you, you were out of the way, and maybe with a bit of time to say, oh, I've never been up this track, or I never saw down there, because you're usually working against the clock, you know, you have to be back for something. So I was getting out early and exploring and running a bit. So yeah, it has been great actually.
Do you run the whole way, or are you a running and walking person like me and be easy on yourself?
No, well, if I set out for a run of whatever, maybe 10, 12, 14, 16k, I'd run. I'd end up, I'd annoy myself if I had to stop to walk.
Okay.
And yeah, so, but I mean, you build up to that. Now, I've probably backed off a little bit in the last few weeks because it's hard to sustain that level of that distance. Like at one point, you know, you could have been 4 days doing over 50k a week, and you know, it's hard to, the body finds it tough to sustain that after a while. But it has been great, like I say, yeah, just for the headspace, as you'd say, to get out and about.
Okay, so I'm sorry to jump into running. I should be talking to you about, okay, how does the young person who was your daddy's shadow on the farm had that interest in agriculture? Where did your path take you after school? Was it studying agriculture in UCD?
Yeah, exactly. So I went to an Irish secondary school in Bray, and I was the only person in the class. Now, we were the first class into the school, and you know, so there was a sort of you can do anything mentality. But I was the only one in the class that went on to study agriculture. So I just knew I wanted to study ag. There was no sort of question in my head. And UCD then was an obvious choice, not just because of where I'm living, but it's such a well-known ag programme. So got into ag and started on the class of 2001. That always makes me feel young when you can say 2001. So started in 97 into animal science. So it's a pretty well-known year, actually, because a lot of the people are, you know, Tommy Boland was in my year, and Alan Fahey and Helen Sheridan and Anne-Marie Butler, who's the ASA president this year. We were all the 1 year, actually. So I was in animal science, and yeah, just loved it. I loved college, loved the college experience. I remember starting and thinking, oh, it'll be a long time before I make any friends, you know. Yeah. And the first day, as we queued up for our student cards, I met a group of girls from Tip and from Wexford, and sure, the first Thursday night we were out in Dublin, and the rest is history. But yeah, fantastic.
It's a great program. It's interesting for students now at the moment who are starting college, and I know, look, we get on, you obviously went from being a student to teaching those students, but it's interesting, that's a very important component of college life, is meeting different people. And Tommy Boland, who I spoke to previously, talked about that. You're meeting people with similar interests yourself as well. You know, you said you studied in secondary school and no one was going to look interested in agriculture, but now suddenly you're exposed to this group of people who are, and you get to learn some lessons. Some of them, the great lessons, are learned in the student bar, I think. Well, that was what I was saying. But I do feel for students now that are, you know, this distance learning, that lack of maybe human interaction that we're all challenged with. It's an interesting time for students, isn't it? Because I think, to me,
it's very, very tough, because I mean, particularly for those who've been in a year or two and they really realise what they're missing. I suppose if you're a first year at the minute, obviously that introduction to college and everything is really important, but please God, they will have time to make that up. You know, that they will get, you know, next year things will be different, or the following year things will be different, we hope. So where, you know, my heart really went out to the fourth years this year. You know, I know they've had a good run at it, but at the same time, where you really, you know, you get to the last semester in college, everybody is really getting on well. You know, you have some great nights out, some real memory builders in those last few months, and then your graduation. And there was every effort, like the university, the School of Ag made every effort to make that as special for people as possible. But it is, you know, it's really difficult, I think, to miss that time with the people that you've spent the last 4 years with. And then, as you say, yeah, nothing can replace sitting in the lecture hall.
Gift keeps on giving. Technology. We were mid-flow, and this is round 2, in case people are wondering what's happening. Karina, you were talking. Zoom just did some crazy stuff for the last 15 minutes with us, but you were talking about the students and the missing out on that experience of the fourth year ag science students this year. And actually, I've met a lot of those students. They were a great class, and I'm sure every class is great, but I happen to have met a lot of them. They missed out on the graduation piece, which is hard. But I suppose that's the way it is, isn't it? There's nothing we can. Hopefully, things will get better.
And so you don't want to be too downbeat either, because they are going on to a big brand new chapter in their lives, be it postgrads or into the workplace. And so, you know, they've missed out on something, but hopefully this will be, you know, on the road to recovery for all of us in terms of getting back to some normality. And you know, I suppose what it does, though, is it makes you appreciate the privilege you have of being able to go to university, to sit in a classroom with people, to learn from others, to interact with, you know, your peers and lecturers. I don't think we've ever really appreciated any of that stuff as much as when you're told that you can't do it anymore. So I think that has been a big learning maybe for all of us over the last number of months. But look, I think the university will do everything it can to make the experience as good as it can, but it's, you know, it's obviously going to be very different.
Okay, so let's take us back to, you're finished your ag science degree and you're wondering what the next steps are. What happened then, yourself in your own early days?
Yeah, in my early days. So I suppose I was finishing up college and thinking about doing a master's. I mean, that was in my mind for a while. And number one, I loved college, so I wanted to, I didn't want to see an end to that anytime soon. And two, I was really, you know, inspired, I suppose, but interested in some of the topics that we were covering. And that wasn't just one. Like, I loved reproductive physiology, I loved nutrition. And then I was doing monogastric nutrition with Professor John O'Doherty, and really enjoyed that. So John won't mind me saying that, you know, I thought he was an excellent teacher, lecturer, really, really enjoyed his classes. And I suppose there was an opportunity there at the time. This is back, like, you know, so 2001 time, and in feed, antibiotics were going to be replaced in feeds, you know, in Europe in 2006. So there was a sort of a lot of research ongoing at the time in replacing in feed antibiotics, particularly in small pig diets. And, you know, so looking at natural alternatives, probiotics, prebiotics, that whole area. And there was a PhD opportunity in that. And even though most of my work placement, my interest actually had been in dairy, that's what I had spent most of my time doing. I saw this and I said, look, it's really interested, go for it. And so I spent 3 years in that PhD program where, you know, we didn't have sows and lions, but we used to get in small pigs from a farm in Kildare, and you would rear them on different feeds. And then those piglets would be, you know, slaughtered at different ages, and you'd be looking at their gut profile in terms of their, you know, their villus height and their crypt depth, so the health of their gut, looking at the bacterial profile, so the good and the bad bacteria, what these feeds were doing in terms of the bacteria they were promoting. Obviously the things like the general growth rates of the animals and all of the feed intake, feed conversion efficiency, all of that stuff. So it was really topical at that stage. So we had lots of opportunity then to travel to conferences. I remember going to Banff in Canada, in the Rockies, to a pig health conference, and great opportunities. So that was 3 years. PhDs now generally tend to be 4 years, but it was a little different at the time. And coming to the end of that, a job opportunity came up in Brett's in Callan as feed, you know, as a nutritionist, and there had been a guy in that position for 14 years, and as luck would have it, he was moving on to something else, and the position arose, and so down I hit then for Kilkenny as a nutritionist. Green as the grass, but yeah, full of enthusiasm, so that obviously counted for something.
It counts for an awful lot, doesn't it, I think?
Yeah. So I suppose, yeah, I wouldn't have, like anybody coming fresh out of college, you don't have a huge amount of real life experience, except for the fact I'd come from a farm. I was really interested. I'd the PhD behind me, and yeah, they were really good, really supportive. I learned a lot with Brett's, and I got to visit a huge number of farms. So there was they were, you know, I suppose there was the pig end of it, but they also, I mean, most of their business was ruminant. So cattle, sheep, and then dairy. And you tend, as you know, to spend quite a lot of time on dairy farms because they can have quite, different problems, different times of the year. So there was an advisory element to it as well. You might have been testing silage and advising on feeds based on the quality of the silage. It might have been issues around sort of lameness, or looking at possible mineral deficiencies. So there was a whole range of real life problems I suppose you're exposed to in that job. So I was 2 years there, and I could see, I suppose there was an opportunity arising. I missed research, and there was an opportunity also sort of arising, and I thought maybe it was time to head back to the hills at that stage. So was thinking about getting married at that point, and thinking about, maybe building back at home, and, all of those things that as your stages of life move on, starting to think about. So that brought me back actually to a research position in UCD, and then the lectureship in dairy arose just shortly after that.
Okay. How did you find that, going from, being a student, going out into the real world, working your PhD, and then teaching? you know, did you take to teaching very well? I've heard some great reports. I'm not just blowing smoke now, but I've heard some great reports. You mentioned John Doherty was a good teacher, but I've heard some great reports. Was that an easy transition for you? You're passionate, you're enthusiastic, you've got the knowledge, intelligence. Was it an easy transition, or did you go into that first lecture hall and go, oh my God, how do I start here?
A little bit of all of those things. So it depends. I mean, you can go into a first year hall of 200 or 300 students, and you can find that kind of scary in that it's you and there's a huge number of people, you know, sitting looking at you. But then you can go into a class of 20 or 30 in fourth year, and their expectations of you are quite different, and they're really on their game, and they've been out on the farms, and they'll challenge you in a completely different way. I was still nervous right up when I was doing that job for 13 years, and I was nervous, I'd say, nearly every time I walked into a classroom. But sometimes I think there's a bit of nerves are good. I never found it tough because I enjoy being around people. I really enjoyed working with students, actually. Even the practicals, the smaller groups, you know, you'd always get a bit of a kick out of them as well, you know. So lots of different personalities. But no, I really enjoyed that, that aspect of the job. So I suppose when you're used to talking to conferences, or you're used to talking one-on-one to farmers, you get used to maybe that aspect of public speaking, I suppose.
Because of your time, obviously you were lecturing and a professor in UCD, you also became, I suppose, you were heavily involved in maybe the dairy industry in Ireland as maybe a key opinion leader, and you saw maybe the massive transitions, pre-quota, post-quota, the work that was been done around genetics and the whole system itself. Over those, maybe you said 10 or 12 years, what were the things that stood out to you, where we made the most progress? What were the things that you look back at and saying, wow, we did really well, you know? Or is that a hard question to ask?
No, I suppose, I mean, there's a few very obvious things, and I'd give Teagasc a huge amount of credit in that area around grassland management. I know we often talk about the percentage of farmers that are actually budgeting grass is quite low, or the percentage of farmers measuring, and we use, so maybe using official tools. But I'd say the awareness of grassland management, the improvement in that has been massive over the years, in terms of what farmers would perceive as quality swards, and the days at grass, and really trying to reduce cost of production through grass, and appreciating what we have in Ireland actually as a resource to us. I think that has changed a lot, and obviously there's been massive gains in genetics too, with the evolution of the EBI over those years as well. And I suppose then that was an area we started to look at more in lines as we developed the herd around the time that, 2015 when quotas went. We had an opportunity then to grow the herd. We had the dairy development, and we started looking at those areas around sort of the high output, if you like, genetics, higher milk yield animals in a grass-based system. So they would be two things I think that would stand out to me that have really improved over the years.
There's one thing for sure, if you're talking about dairy farming and you want to raise an argument, you can talk about systems and which system over other systems. There can be, and I tend to work with every sort of system, low input, high input. Well, maybe there's more work in high input systems, that's an argument there. But I suppose for me, looking at the UCD herd, I went back into the grad cert with Finbar Mulligan and the team there. I found and still find the research going on in UCD, and maybe I'm biased because it's my former alma mater as well, but I found the UCD research farm really interesting, and still do, the dairy herd and the flock there, of course, as well. But I think, and talking to farmers, they really appreciated that system and that look at that system. Just talk a little bit about how that system's evolved, the dairy herd and lions. Just give people a little bit of an overview of why that system was a little bit different. You mentioned it was, higher output system.
Yeah, so I suppose you work with the resources we have. So UCD, obviously Lyons Farm is the farm associated with the university and used extensively by the School of Ag and the School of Vet, which you know from your time in the college. But the genetics, I mean, UCD had been using EBI from the time it came out. So we were actually a high EBI herd anyway. A background of liquid milk because of the area. I mean, it borders Dublin, so it was a liquid milk herd traditionally, but would have had that sort of milkiness in the herd, and started breeding to EBI from the beginning. So it was a herd that was kind of around the top 10% of EBI anyway. So we were, we had to develop the dairy in terms of the new building. We had the opportunity then, we doubled the size of the herd in 2015, so from 100 to 200 cows around, obviously when quotas were going. And I suppose then as a group, so you mentioned Finbar, myself, Bridget Lynch, Alan Fahey, Michael Wallace, people like that, sitting down and saying, okay, and talking to a lot of farmers, what are the issues that farmers are having? What are the questions that are there? Giving Teagasc again a huge credit for the work that they were doing at the same time in, crossbreeding, in grass-based systems and so on. But there's no point in duplicating work that's already been done. So what were the questions? And one of the very obvious things that came up was, okay, a lot of Irish farms are fragmented. So expansion for a lot of farmers is not going to be more cows and more land, because they're operating on maybe small milking platforms and 2 or 3 blocks of land. So expansion for them means something different. So how can those farmers expand and grow their business in a post-quota era? So that was one of the questions. And was that going to be through, a smaller number of cows but higher milk output on a per cow basis? And we know the history of that in terms of higher output cows, issues with fertility, high replacement rates, all the costs that are associated with that. But we were dealing with high EBI cows. So if they're high EBI, should those animals not have the ability to go back and calf? Their EBI are telling us they should be profitable. So we, I suppose, started exploring that. But again, realising, I suppose, that the importance of grass in an Irish context. And what maybe wasn't been done elsewhere was looking at that high output genetics in a grass-based system, on a what for a lot of farmers would be a small milking platform, and trying to get, optimising that system. And what we were finding was a lot of farmers thinking about or in those higher output systems were going north for their information, because there was a gap in knowledge, if you like, in the south. And I suppose in some ways we started to fill that gap. So what we were looking at was, again, top 1-2% EBI animals in a higher concentrate system, so where they were being fed about 1.5 tons. But for that we were trying to get about 620 kilos of solids. So again, high, sort of that kilo of milk solids per kilo of body weight principle. So even though our system was somewhat different, a lot of the principles were the same. The principles of high grass intake, the principles of high EBI, the principles of focusing on financials and, efficiency measures like kilo of milk solids per kilo of body weight. So the animals we'd have been dealing with were about 620 kilos mature weight. So I suppose that started, in about 2016 in a collaborative project that involved a number of industry partners, and Enterprise Ireland, as it would happen, that funded that research programme for us. And then that was 2016, 17 and 18. And then we secured dairy levy funding for another 3 years, because when you're looking at things like genetics and, grassland, parameters and so on, it's very difficult to get anything meaningful in a year or two. You really need to expand that over a longer research programme. And that work is still ongoing with Finbar and Bridget Lynch and so on in Lyons.
I think it's been very successful. I think it's been very beneficial. I like the updates from them. I've been lucky to visit UCD, and you can see this shift now again into this juggernaut of the environment is coming in at us, and you can see even from a feeding perspective from the concentrates, looking at homegrown cereals, reducing protein, looking at maybe nitrogen outputs from the farm, mixed species grazing. So it's very interesting, isn't it, to see where do you think, and I know you've removed from it now, but you're not removed because you're obviously would be keeping.
No, I'd still be in touch with it a good bit.
Yeah. But where do you think, so the focus, and I could see why the focus was there on production, fertility, output, with a different, a bigger cow. But where do you think that project will go now for the next 3 to 5 years? Will it be the other things like the environment, or will that be just a part of it, or is it, is still the focus, the proof of concept that these larger cows in a system like that can be quite efficient?
Yeah, so I suppose that's where it started in terms of the, people say why that level of feeding. We were looking for this higher output to see what these high EBI animals could do and still go back in calf. And so I suppose the first few years was looking at that, which of these animals were actually achieving the 620 kilos, which of the animals were going back in calf, and sort of really getting a picture of that. And then, as you rightly say, the focus has turned to more, I suppose, efficiency, environmental sustainability, those kind of measures. So looking at reducing protein significantly, because we know from other work that we did there that we can reduce the protein in the feed, which the Department of Ag is looking at currently too, with issues around nitrates and water quality and so on. And I think the work will continue, will need to continue in that vein as well. Looking at reducing inputs into the system, looking closely at, soil health, at biodiversity, at, the multi-species work that Helen Sheridan and Tommy are leading as well. Reducing nitrogen into the system, use of clover, all of those things again. And then I suppose it's when you look then at the genetics and you look at the output, how does all of that fit together? So I think that will continue to be, and you mentioned there too about native cereals. So one of the treatments or feeds that are being fed this year is all native protein and native cereals, as we look at, I suppose, in shortening the supply chain, reducing our reliance on imported protein. And the fact that we in general overfeed protein as well, that with grass in the diet that we don't need to feed very much extra protein, it's really energy we need. So yeah, I'd say that will be a significant focus in, over the coming years.
There's a huge amount of conversations happening at the moment about, and it seems to be maybe COVID has sped it up, I don't know, about where agriculture is positioned and livestock production is positioned globally from a perspective of the environment. I think it was last Sunday, I spoke to a good few farmers yesterday who'd watched a program on RT on Sunday, basically people saying, less meat, less milk, green, plant-based diets. And there's a lot of science and research going on, but is the science and research, are we matching the sort of challenges that are out there, the perceptions? I know it's perceptions maybe versus science. How important is research, and is the research going to be good enough maybe to tackle some of this what often feels like to me a tidal wave of people saying that farming is bad for the environment, farming is this, farming is that?
Yeah, look, there are huge challenges there at the minute, I think. Lots of good research going on all over the world. One of the big challenges is translating that research into something that's understandable, or that that people in general are interested in hearing about. And the sort of popular narrative at the minute is, I won't say anti-agriculture, but it's not very positive towards agriculture. But I think we see in a lot of those programs, like the one you mentioned the other night, there's a lot of misinformation in that. And the popular press seems really happy to carry that or to promote that misinformation, as in you'll see people on a morning show that are talking about so-called alternative milks, but they're not qualified dietitians or nutritionists. They come from a completely different background. So that to me is actually a little scary at the minute is the promotion of alternatives. Every one of us should be eating a balanced diet. I don't think anybody is saying that we should be eating a full meat diet, or I think for the most of us, we are eating a plant-based diet. You're eating a mix of everything. But I think the balance in the argument has shifted in a direction. And I think in general, the industry is maybe struggling to deal with that a little bit in terms of, do you fight fire with fire? And that sometimes gives air to the negative narrative. Do you allow it to continue? And so there's definitely, I think, a question in how you deal with the narrative. I don't think there's a lack of good science. There's not a lack of research. It's just how you translate that research and deliver a message when there's just a big movement behind, a different message at the minute. I think partly, like, we've a lot of good organisations in the country, a lot of very excellent people who are driving a positive message around agriculture, but maybe we need to be a bit more coordinated in that.
Okay. And you've watched agriculture over the last 10 years. We talked about genetics, grassland management, and it's not like we can't say everything is perfect with agriculture either.
No.
We have challenges out there, and probably from my reading of the situation, the environment is going to be the big driver for every business, not just agriculture. What will the next 10 years look like? What will our production systems look like if you were looking into your crystal ball and you were saying you've been involved with dairy for the last 12, 15 years, and you've seen the research, you've been on the ground, you've been at the highest level. What do you think the next 10 years is going to look like? What are going to be, if I'm a dairy farmer, if I'm a farmer in general, what are the trends I need to watch out for? Because we can't ignore this change coming.
No, I mean, sure, look, you can see with the EU Green Deal or the Farm to Fork, I mean, the direction that Europe is setting for farming. And that is definitely around lower inputs of, chemical use, fertilizer, an increase in organics. All of that seems to be on the cards. So I suppose it's farming with less of the tools that we're used to using. And I mean, there are definitely challenges around that, that farmers haven't been, because we haven't been used to farming in that way. So a continued focus on sustainability and on the environment. And if you look at, say, and because I'm dealing with a lot of dairy companies now on a slightly different side of it, I mean, the customers of Irish dairy are asking more and more around sustainability credentials and asking us to back up what we're talking about in terms of Origin Green and different excellent programs that we have, but they are continually being challenged. So if we are, I suppose, operating and selling a lot of the time on the basis of our green credentials, we're going to have to continually back that up with proof.
Okay, so that takes me to your new role. So you bravely left a great career which you had built and a role which you built in New City to take on a new challenge, and that is not an easy move. And I know that you didn't take it lightly to move with your current role of Enterprise Ireland. It also coincided with COVID-19, which is I think you're in the Home Office there, a whole other set of circumstances. So how has that transition been? Talk to me a little bit. You don't have to get into detail of was it maybe why you took on that challenge, and it's a brave new chapter, but it has been compounded, I imagine, by the fact that we're in a global pandemic. First of all, how is your new role?
Really good. So I suppose I'm what's called a senior development advisor in Enterprise Ireland, and basically what that means is I work on a team of dairy and food, foreign direct investment, and there's a drinks, beverages within my team as well. And basically I'm working with a portfolio of Irish companies, predominantly dairy, so processors and infant formula companies and a few others in the mix as well. And so it's the same industry. It's still ag and food to me, but I'm looking at it from the other side of the coin in some ways, post-farm gate processing and so on. But I think the knowledge, that all comes obviously from the farmers and the production systems that produce the milk into the processor, and then what they do with that and the value that they add to that goes back to farmers and rural communities. So I suppose companies, as you can imagine, have a lot of challenges. And I saw, as I was thinking about a change, Enterprise Ireland, I think, have a really important role in supporting companies to grow and develop. Now, they're focused on companies that are export orientated, which obviously a lot of agriculture for us is. But companies dealing with Brexit, dealing with COVID, trying to increase value add, looking at market diversification away from the UK, perhaps into other areas, looking at product diversification, we'll say away from cheddar into other products. So it's a challenging time with those companies, but a really exciting time as well to be involved with them. And it has actually amazed me how resilient and innovative they are. I mean, you see it at farmer level, but you also see it right through to, where these companies were dealing with COVID, had to change completely the way they were working. The dairy industry has been, so successful over the last 6 months through peak milk production, when you think about it, and COVID at its worst in Ireland, that they managed through that period so successfully. So again, I'm working with those companies through a whole range of projects, be they looking at reducing their environmental footprint, looking at R&D, and sort of the next step for them in terms of the next type of products or value add that they're looking at. Enterprise Ireland supports people development, the whole lean programs and sort of lean thinking in business. Really, really varied role. So, but getting to grips with it, I'm only in the position 4 months and have never made it into the office in Dublin, which was where, I was supposed to be based. I'm in a room upstairs in a corner. So that's the office for me now.
What are the trends globally around new markets for us? So, traditionally Europe and obviously the UK, Brexit is just, we won't even get in there to trying to understand the challenges there. But, new markets, is it Asia? People talk about Asia. And maybe then when you look at those new markets, you mentioned, is there other opportunities? Baby formula being the one, cheese, but is there other opportunities if you look at milk as a health food? Are we doing a good enough job around actually the quality? I've seen some research around the properties of milk being involved in supportive treatment for maybe older patients, sarcopenia, all those sort of things. Where are the trends, where are the markets and where are the trends going over the next 10 years?
Yeah, so I suppose obviously the likes of China has been a huge focus for us. So infant formula as a product, China as a market, and will remain so, being hugely, very, very important to us. But it's always prudent to be looking at, what are the next big things, what the industry needs to be working towards. And as you rightly mentioned, senior or elderly nutrition, health and wellness, they are areas that are growing, and looking at milk and the sort of the goodness of milk in at all stages of our life. So again, infant formula has been a huge development for us here that has added value to milk. But I think, as you say, there are sort of some of those big areas. And COVID, I think too, has really focused people's minds on being fit and healthy and well. And I heard Zoe Kavanagh giving a talk lately in the NDC around, a lot of people in 30s, 40s age bracket and so on that have increased their intake of dairy. I know we're all baking more and we're eating more butter and cheese and so on over the last 6 months. So dairy intake for many groups actually have increased over the last number of months. In terms of markets, then again, like I say, China, there's obviously still huge potential, but Asia, I think, massive potential in countries across Asia. You'll see some of our processors too, in terms of, diversifying the type of cheese that they're making, and that might be for European markets as well. North America, if you look at the success of Kerrygold butter in markets like North America and Germany still, so Irish dairy is really well perceived around the world for quality, for taste, and it's just continuing to build on that reputation, I think.
You're one of the leading people in agriculture. You're obviously very smart, intelligent. You're a little bit of fun as well when you meet you in person. But you are one of the leading people in agriculture. You also are a woman, and a high-profile woman in agriculture. We often have this debate, or certainly discussion about women in agriculture. Have we enough women in agriculture in leading positions? Is that something you think we can get better at, or is that something we're doing a really good job on? What's your opinion?
It's still a challenge for us, but I don't know. Sometimes, I worked, so agriculture is very male dominated, but I mean, if you look at sort of at higher levels across a lot of industries, it isn't really maybe that much different. And I think there's some really good work being done in terms of, even looking at the role of women in farming, and at sort of so in primary agriculture, and then across other levels. I mean, it makes sense to have diversity in all aspects of life for different opinions. You know that, Tommy, as well from Nuffield. I mean, that's what brings about richness of conversation, brings about new ideas. And so having an all-male board of a particular age group from within a few counties of each other, you would say, is that going to bring about or challenge ideas or the norm? And, where if there were women involved, people from different backgrounds, people who shake up the normal thinking a little bit, I mean, we can all see that there are benefits of that. So I think it's definitely improving. The awareness of it is improving, but I'd say we still have a long way to go.
I think it's an important topic. I think it's just a diversity of ideas.
Yeah.
Especially if we face so many different challenges, and the rule book is changing in relation to maybe the media, how they portray agriculture and everything like that. And, we need to show a diversity across gender and age profiles, and maybe people who have different opinions than the way we always did things. So I think it's maybe challenging the status. Maybe agriculture is have we been a bit conservative? Are we a conservative industry? Okay. Right. Well, Zoom is really playing up, and for the third time, we were mid-flow in a very interesting conversation. We're back again. We're going to get to the final stretch of it now, Karina, because I'm nearly to the end of the questions I have here. But I was asking you, are we a little bit conservative in agriculture? Do we need to take the shackles off a little bit? Especially when consumers around us or the marketplace might be changing a little bit, or are we doing a good job, and we shouldn't be changing too much based on maybe fads and trends?
Yeah, so there's definitely a balance to be struck there. I think in general, if you look, I mean, we do an awful lot of things very right here. We have really good products to promote that form part of a healthy, balanced diet. But I wonder, as an industry, we're very good, and we all attend conferences, and we're very good at talking to ourselves. Do we look at the message and how we enough in terms of how we communicate with other people who are not as familiar with agriculture, and maybe don't understand agriculture? And I think, like I'd mentioned before, we have a lot of excellent people in the industry, a lot of good organizations doing great work. It's maybe coordinating that more, and that we have a much more coordinated approach to our messaging from the industry. Because a lot of people and living in cities are very far removed, not even living in cities, but in all parts of the country are much further removed from agriculture and primary agriculture than we were 20, 30 years ago. And that's something, as I travelled with Nuffield last year, that I definitely saw is the growing disconnect between primary production and consumers. It was one of the standouts in all parts of the world. And that's something I think we continually have to work on.
And that's a really hard task. Talk to me about Nuffield. So you're doing a Nuffield scholarship. Obviously that's been disrupted because Nuffield, a big part of it is travel. You were lucky to get a lot of your travel done. Tell people just a bit about your research topic, and how it's going for you.
Yeah, so actually, I mean, while I know COVID has been, has made this year really difficult, I was blessed last year. I mean, I got 12 weeks travel done. My last trip was at the start of February, or was in February. I went to Brussels with another 2019 scholar, Alison Holmes, and we traveled to Brussels, and that was the end of my travels. I might have gone on 1 or 2 short trips. I was hoping to get to the Netherlands and to the UK, but I had got a fair run at it at that stage, Tommy. So I was on the brownie points were well used up at home at that point. But as I think of it this year, and I couldn't go 2 kilometres hardly to the local village to Roundwood to get bread. And you know, as you know, you'd sit here and you think, oh my God, this time last year I was in Japan, I was in Indonesia, I was in France and Canada and several parts of the US. Went to Australia, New Zealand, Italy. I mean, incredible. An incredible journey personally and I suppose professionally, but yeah, really fantastic opportunity. So I suppose part of Nuffield, as you know, is the Global Focus Programme, which is just really, I think, about opening your mind to global agriculture and learning from others. So I was in a group of 10 and there was 2 of us from Ireland, myself and Ali, and we were both, I suppose, working in dairy. The rest of them were, you know, beef farmers from Queensland in Australia, or cotton growers, or, you know, the first Chilean scholar who was an arable farmer. So they didn't know too much about dairy. And while we thought it was the centre of our world, you soon realise that globally, it isn't to a lot of people. So there's that sort of really getting a good view of global agriculture. And then there's your own study topic. And I was looking at future-proofing the sector through research. And is today's research answering or helping to answer the questions of tomorrow? So I got to visit a lot of universities. I got to go to a lot of research organizations around the world. I spoke to an awful lot of people here at home as well, which I think is really important, as you know, you have that. And I've spent obviously time involved with Teagasc too. And yeah, an incredible experience. So my report has been submitted. And we unfortunately won't have a proper conference this year, which, you know, you miss out on obviously the opportunity to present, but looking at how best to do that virtually, I think, is on the cards over the next few weeks.
We will get an opportunity to hear you present. People will there be a
Yes, yeah, there will be, yeah. So again, I think that's been decided as to the best way of doing that in terms of presentation or interview, you know, and then of course when it's done virtually, it's available to everybody. But it's just, again, that interaction that you have at an Nuffield conference, and that opportunity to meet people you haven't seen in a long time. Unfortunately, that networking won't happen this year, but you know.
For such, you obviously very high profile within the industry. It's a big topic. There'll be a lot of people watching what you have to say. No pressure now, Karina, but no better person. I'd be interested to read that report, and I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks.
Okay, listen, you've been very kind with your time. Zoom has not exactly been playing ball with us this morning, but we've got through it. I suppose I've always admired you professionally for your abilities, but you know, you're also a man, and you're a busy, you know, you're a homemaker at home. But you seem to just make so much good use of your time. You're, I think, what to describe as a high performer. How do you, like, what are the lessons that you've learned that, you know, keep you going, that, you know, able to balance all those things, that 14-kilometer run in the morning, the school runs, the new job? What are some of the lessons you've learned yourself along the way? You know, what keeps you motivated? What keeps you taking over? Is it just being organized?
There's a little bit of that, but I think, you know, I've great support around me. I mean, I live opposite my mum. I've 3 brothers who live along the road, and I mean, they give me a shout for something if they need something. And same with me. I have a sister who lives in the States who came to Ireland last year when I was on my Nuffield travels, and minded the kids for a while and took them back to America with her. I mean, so you know, like anything, you have a team of people around you, be that in work or at home, that allow you to do things. I mean, you couldn't do it without that support. I've really good friends, and they keep you motivated, pick you up on days. Like all of us at this time, I think, have had days where you're thinking, what is happening in the world? So picking up the phone and chatting to those people. But I get a great kick out of work. I've always loved the job or jobs I do, and that keeps you motivated as well. And then, you know, I suppose now things change a little bit, as in, like, so I'm involved in the community here in the community council, but I'm also involved in the GAA with the under 10s. But that means myself and Neve going down in the car twice a week to the under 10s, and you're doing stuff together like that. So you're busy, but you're doing stuff with the kids. So, I mean, you have a larger troop than I do, Tommy, so you'll know
it's definitely something, I think, when you are work focused, that it's hard to balance sometimes, you know, that I would be happy to admit that it's not my forte, that I haven't got right yet. Not that I'm making an effort to try and do it, but it is difficult.
I don't know, is there any right? Because I think you can spend your whole life trying to find a right balance, and I'm not sure if there is ever such thing. There'll be a right balance for a particular week or a time of your life or a day, or, you know, I think it's just do your best. And you know, and some days you'll be challenged, and other days, you know, you'll think things have gone pretty okay. And I suppose at the minute, you know, I'm not commuting. That has been a big change, you know, in terms of being around in the mornings and finding myself with a few hours in the day, actually, where I might have been on the M50 before. That has definitely changed the dynamic of the day. It's not to say I wouldn't like to get in the car again and go to work and go to an office, because I certainly miss that. But yeah, like I say, I think we could spend all our lives looking for the right balance. So I think we just try to do our best.
And get your own model as well that works for you.
Exactly. And works for your family, and absolutely.
One of the great quotes I heard over lockdown was progress over perfection. We're all working towards progress. What's the next 10 years look like, Karina? What's, you know, you've taken on your roles in UCD, your new role, your Nuffield. Are you going to pull the handbrake at some stage and take it easy, or, you know, are you addicted to that push and that change and that challenge? Is that what you like? And do you view agriculture as, with its many challenges, a really exciting industry like I do? That doesn't mean it's going to be an easy decade for us, but it's going to be an exciting one. So what does the next decade look for you?
I suppose obviously I've moved into a new role that gives me a different view of the industry. So I've a lot to learn in that. So that's kind of the immediate focus. I'm through Enterprise Ireland doing an executive development program. So there's a lot of stuff in that around leadership and, I suppose, self-development and you know, so that, again, lots of new challenges. So I think it's getting to grips with the role I'm in, continuing to play an active agriculture, or a role in agriculture, as much as I can. You know, being active and you know, giving back to Nuffield, obviously, which has given a huge amount to me in the last couple of years, I think is something I'd really like to do. Like the ASA as well is something I was, you know, involved in as a council member and president in the past, and still like to help out there. So it's just staying actively involved in the industry, learning as much as I can, giving back where I can. Yeah, a really great industry. So like you say, lots of challenges, but that means you need lots of people and lots of good people in the industry. So yeah, exciting times.
Lastly, who are the people who've inspired you the most over your career?
So I've had people in UCD that have inspired me. Like I'd mentioned John earlier as somebody that I really admired in terms of his ideas and drive for research and the kind of teacher he is. I've had fantastic mentors through, still do, you know, through Nuffield, through the ASA. You know, yeah, Michael Miley is somebody who'd come to my mind through ASA, who worked with me all through the time I was president and gave me the background on everybody I needed to know. So you just keep in touch with people. You can always learn something from people, and that's, I think, something Nuffield has taught me, is just open your mind and you can always learn. So I think, again, if you look around this industry, there's an awful lot of, you know, really, really good people that can inspire us and that we can learn from.
Excellent. It's been an absolute pleasure. Aside from Zoom giving us some hassle, but it's great, and I'm looking forward to your Nuffy report. I'm looking forward to Nuffy conference. Thank you so much for your time. Continue to use all your energy and skills, and keep driving forward. I think Enterprise Ireland are very lucky to have you on board, and you're a massive asset. You're a lost UCD, but you're a massive asset to Enterprise Ireland. So
thanks,
we might, if I can get past that the 20-kilometre zone and move.
You might make your way up here.
I might crisscross paths on the mountains, but it's been an absolute pleasure this morning. Thank you so much, Karina.